Hey guys, welcome back to BIM Rules of Engagement. And this week we're talking about how do we train teams to bring us answers and not problems. Now, if I mention the word extreme talent, your first thoughts might be an extreme sport. Now, certain sports, I think we can all agree, failure is not an option. And maybe training till you're nauseous, because quitting is also not an option. And I've been down that road with certain of my sports, and I've also got, unfortunately, the scars to prove it. Yet, now think of our industry as an extreme environment where failure, I think, is not an option in a world where everything is becoming so connected and where almost everything is becoming equally excellent. And without a doubt, I think this industry technology alone is becoming so extreme in its own way that there's no reason why we as individuals cannot be exceptional in what we do and help teams as well as projects to become successful. How many industry professionals do you think can actually walk the BIM talk? We can all talk about respecting, let's say, the digital differences or hiring new talent and giving resources maybe a new job description or a title based on maybe their achievement within a course or a certificate of attendance. And let's just expect them to get on with their job. We can maybe all just be even a rock and roll as a BIM leader still and continue to show the team the digital engineering while keeping within these boundaries as well as these BIM foundations. And if you've been listening to the last 10 rules, you'll see that we've discussed all those issues in the past. We also can agree that best practice, regardless of your role on the project, in this new era of thinking, needs to be an interaction online with not only an individual, but a team right from the very start of the project. In one of my previous rules, I also mentioned that it's good to have a BIM buddy or someone who is more experienced than you that can guide you through or mentor you through some of these toughest challenges that we're facing on projects today. Now, sharing models and technology preferences is not just all about working with BIM, but it's also about how we create an intelligent working environment, bringing this team together and understanding the team's communication process. Hopefully, this environment also allows the team to work in what we call a real-time environment. And that gives us an opportunity to address these issues as well as these challenges using what we know as one source of the truth. Now, placing all this information, this documentation, and this data into, let's say, a project central office, better known as a common data environment, it doesn't help us putting a BIM data manager in place. That's no better off than putting the document manager to manage the documents in the old traditional project style method. Remember, this new way of working with a common data environment trains the teams to take ownership of information while we're sharing and maintaining and publishing information to the project CDE. If we had to look at this recent pandemic and how these lockdown rules have been set, even these online interactions have not only forced us to bring new creative ideas to the team, but it's allowed us to become even almost more dynamic in the same way as we need to now train people to bring us maybe solutions and not problems. Remember, it's too easy sometimes for a team to sit around a table, may it be on-site or off-site, and whine and give their ideas about the issues they have within the project. But this new digital way of communication is now training us, or maybe even forcing us, to take ownership of tasks and maybe provide the answers once we start having access to all the information within a CDE. Remember, the biggest key in our own reaction is the behavior and how we respond to information that we've maybe received. It's not just about the doc controller or even that data manager who's now responding on your behalf with a transmittal. When people bring you a solution, you are enlisting that task with a team to solving it. And now with the entire team having access to that CDE, you're making the problem not only yours, but the entire team's. And using this CDE platform, you're now training the staff to bring you problems, but also provide you information in real time to provide those possible solutions for the task at hand. Today's way of working is not just all about fixing the problem at hand, but rather what we need to look at is the long-term benefits to the answer provided by the team. Now, David Shepherd is a well-recognized BIM expert who's drawn upon almost 24 years of extensive real-world project experience in BIM. As an experienced BIM practitioner, he also works for the House of Commons in the UK and is tasked every day to train teams not only to bring him solutions, but identify problems.
Hi, I'm Dave Shepherd and I'm the client-side BIM project leader at the UK House of Commons in Westminster, London. My role is devoted to achieving just three key overarching outcomes from BIM. Firstly, to reduce downstream design and construction risk through improved upstream coordination. Secondly, to reduce operation and maintenance cost by using the tools to collect comprehensive digital asset data from all of our suppliers and subcontractors. And then thirdly, to improve stakeholder engagement, especially with non-technical people, by leveraging BIM to visualize the project in 3D and 4D, for instance, and that maintains a common understanding of the design and construction proposals that are under consideration. Now, 2021 is a special year for me. It marks 30 years of a career in CAD and BIM. And certainly the world has changed a lot since 1991 when I started this journey. I was a qualified architectural technician. I was training engineers and architects to use AutoCAD Release 11. Out of those 30 years, 11 of them were working for Autodesk. So I was senior technical trainer for EMEA for 7 years. And then 4 years ago, I worked as the technical consulting manager for global consulting delivery. And that role involved tier one designers and contractors improving their business outcomes through digitizing their design and construction processes. Before that, I was at HOK London, and as BIM manager, I worked on the 8.5 million square foot LG Science Park in South Korea. Also worked on New Papworth Hospital. I was involved in authoring the BIM strategy and implementation plan for the Houses of Parliament, and I also wrote the BIM Management Handbook. Now, in my spare time, I'm a big fan of music, and especially 60s old school reggae. And one of the greatest exponents of that was Jimmy Cliff. And he had a song, There Are More Questions Than Answers. Well, one line in that, he says, the more I find out, the less I know. And that probably brings me to the subject of this talk, which is teach them to bring answers, not questions. Several years ago, I was working on a project which involved setting up digital checklists for a tier one contractor. Using BIM, we were able to slice and dice that data by room and by location and then present it through dashboards. But one of the challenges we had was identifying root causes. And at the time, in the previous physical checklist, there was something like 20 odd options for root causes. Immediately, I saw that that was presenting more questions than answers. There was a need to whittle down to a few key options that made it simple and effective for people to identify where the real challenges were in the project. In the same way, when we look at our projects, one of the key things that we need to do is to help people to whittle down the number of options, and we need to encourage staff to think in that way. And that means that we need to build a culture of responsibility. Sometimes it's as simple as giving people permission to bring their own solutions and answers to the table. So that means asking them things like, what would you do in this situation if I wasn't here? How do you think, what are the potential options for solving this particular issue? And really, in order to build that culture of responsibility, what's required is not management, but actually leadership. Now, there's a book by Robert Cialdini called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. And in it, he gives 6 key factors which will convince people to adopt a particular course of action. If you want to move from being a manager to being a leader, then there are those things that do actually apply. So one is authority. People tend to obey those who've been bestowed with authority by recognized leaders. So giving people a sense that they have been bestowed with authority and having your own sense of being bestowed with authority by the wider senior leadership of the organization is always a benefit to showing and exhibiting good leadership. The second one is commitment and consistency. So, in other words, people don't actually like self contradiction. And it means that we need to commit to an idea and follow it through and not change it unless good reasons are presented for doing so. That means that we do need to be consistent. The third key factor is liking. People are more influenced by people that they like. So leadership involves building a social culture which allows people to see that you have their best will and you have their best intentions at heart. The fourth is reciprocity. And that factor means that there is a sense of mutually doing things for each other. And that means that you have to take the initiative in helping other people if you want to enlist their help for yourself. The fifth one is social proof. And that means that people conform to a growing consensus. And that means that we need to win hearts and minds in the wider organization. That has implications for how we present the information that we have. And the final factor is scarcity. People gravitate towards things that appear to be in limited supply. So guess what? In a context where there are lots of questions, lots of uncertainty, and plenty of risk, being able to whittle down the options available to the few viable ones is actually something that people will gravitate towards. Now, give you a life experience analogy. I'm a big fan of steak and love going to steak restaurants. And some of the questions you get from the waiter are expected. Do you want your steak to be rare, medium rare, or well done? And you can go with some of that. Others would be, do you want Diane sauce, peppercorn sauce, or barbecue sauce? For me, it's peppercorn sauce. But it can get a bit much when you start going to, do you want kettle fries, sweet potato fries, double cooked fries, or mash? Do you want them ready salted, or do you want salt at the table? Do you want mustard, ketchup, mayonnaise, vinegar? Is that Dijon mustard then, or English mustard, or truffle mustard? And then which particular brand of mustard do you want? You're exhausted by too many questions. And then they throw on, oh, by the way, do you have any food allergies? The moral to the story is what? It's that too many questions or options or lack of context can undermine your best intentions for asking those questions. Now, you don't solve this by issuing a RASI matrix. What you do is that you establish a responsibility culture by giving people discretion that they need to get their jobs done. What do you think about this? What options do you foresee? What would you do if I wasn't available to assist you? Let's take a few examples and then see if we can draw out some principles from that. So one example would be a design or a clash issue tracking system. And you've got an input form where you've got literally 10 or 20 different options for the root cause of those clashes and design issues. People do not want to choose from so many options in order to fulfill the primary task that they have. It ends up being a distraction from what their actual day job is. You might have a COBE validation report with 10,000 listed items that need to be addressed. But if you issue that to senior project stakeholders without giving them a summary of how it relates to the overall business objectives, you will lose the commitment of people. Bring solutions. In other words, identify the major problems. Is it the plant room area? Is it that there's congestion and let's say in the key shafts and the cores of the building? There's no sense, for instance, in issuing a non-compliance report and then not providing a short list of remedial actions for rectifying them. So what are maybe 4 key things that we can learn from this? Firstly, be pertinent. Your reports, your outputs will be evaluated in terms of W2IFM. What's in it for me? So you need to relate whatever you're putting, even in the executive summary, to the goals of your recipients. Normally, it's going to be cost, it's going to be schedule, it's going to be quality, it's going to be safety. The second point is to preface with purpose. So explain how this fits into the bigger picture of the overall project. What's the scale of these issues in terms of cost or the impact on the timescale for delivering the project? And then thirdly, prioritize. So highlight those key issues that have the most impact on the overall objective of the project. Summarize in terms of cost, schedule, quality, and safety. And then finally, always propose potential solutions. In other words, provide some recommended next steps and identify your key asks from the senior stakeholders that you're addressing. If there is no ask from those stakeholders, then preface your report with the summary that says, for information only, no action required. In summary, if you want your BIM role and your initiatives to gain respect, then you need to establish a culture that allows staff to use their discretion and to develop their own answers and whittle down options that will mitigate risk in terms of cost, schedule, quality, and safety. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you some tips and tricks, and I hope that they'll be beneficial to